There is a doll that never stopped smiling. Locals say her smile used to be gentle, a reminder of the little girl she once belonged to. But something changed. Her hair began to grow. Her eyes seemed to follow those who passed by. And the smile, that smile, slowly twisted into something else. They say if you stand too close, you'll feel her watching you back. And if you meet her gaze for too long, you won't be able to look away. This is the story of the haunted smiling doll of Japan, before the doll became a legend. It belonged to a real child. Her name was Okiku, a quiet girl who lived in the early 1900s, in a small seaside town on the island of Hokkaido. She was given the doll as a gift. A simple toy. Black hair, soft face, dressed in a tiny kimono. But to Okiku, it was more than a toy. She carried it everywhere. Slept with it. Spoke to it. Some said she treated it like a sister. Others said she treated it like a mirror. And then, the tragedy came. Okiku fell ill. The kind of illness that doctors back then had no name for. Only silence, fever, and waiting. When she passed away, her family was shattered. They placed the doll beside her body, just for one last goodbye. But the goodbye never ended. When the funeral ended, the doll was brought home. And little by little, they noticed something was changing. The hair. It was longer. Not just uneven. Not just messy. But growing. At first, the family thought it was their imagination. Maybe the hair was always that long. But then, they trimmed it. Carefully. Slowly. With their own hands. And within days, the hair grew back. It kept growing. Longer than before. Dark. Smooth. Alive. The family became afraid. They brought the doll to a local priest. He examined it. He said there was no trick. No wires. No hidden mechanism. Then he said something else. Something the family never forgot. The child's spirit does not know it has died. They were told to keep the doll safe. To treat it with respect. And to pray. Every day. But the changes did not stop. The hair kept growing, yes. But soon, another detail began to appear. Something much more disturbing than hair. Inside the doll's mouth, tiny white shapes began to form. Teeth. Real, human teeth. The doll was eventually taken to a temple in Hokkaido. Mananji Temple. The monks there did not treat it as an object. They treated it as a child. They placed it on a small altar, surrounded by candles and offerings, toys, and letters. And every year, the monks would gather to perform a quiet, sacred ritual. They cut the doll's hair. Slowly. Carefully. Like a grieving mother trimming her child's bangs. But no matter how many times they cut it, the hair returned. Scientists were brought in. Samples were taken. And the results were clear. The hair belonged to a real human child. No synthetic fibers. No trick. The monks said, "The spirit remains. It is gentle. Unless disturbed." But visitors began reporting something else. When they stood in front of the doll, they felt like they were being watched. And when they looked away, they swore the doll's eyes were following them. Visitors began to return to the temple. Some came out of curiosity. Others came to ask for blessings. But a few left with memories they refused to speak about for years. One woman said she felt a presence behind her while she was looking at the doll. She turned around. No one was there. But when she looked back, the doll's head had shifted. Just slightly. To the left. Another visitor, a young man, stayed longer than most. He stared at the doll, studying its eyes, trying to understand the stories. He said the longer he watched, the more the smile began to change. Slowly. Softly. As if someone behind that porcelain face was waking up. He ran. And when priests found him at the temple gate, shaking, barely able to speak, he only said one thing. It was happy to see me. After that night, he never returned. The hair was tested again. This time, in a modern laboratory. Under a microscope, the strands were clear. Human. But something was wrong. Human hair stops growing after death. It dries. It breaks. It falls away. But this hair was alive. Smooth. Moist. Growing from the inside of the doll's head. When researchers attempted to trace the root, they found that the hair fibers extended deeper than the wig seam. Almost as if the doll's head was growing it. One scientist suggested that the doll was absorbing environmental moisture. Another suggested temperature changes. But none of their explanations could answer the real question. Why did the hair match a child who died over a century ago? The doll still sits on display today, inside Mananji Temple, behind a carefully polished glass case. The temple is open to the public, but the locals rarely go. They walk past the entrance, slowly, eyes forward, as if acknowledging something they would rather not remember. Tourists, however, they come with curiosity. They come for stories. And some leave with more than that. One woman, a visitor from Sapporo, wanted only to take a picture. She stood in front of the glass, raised her phone, waited for it to focus. But the image did not appear. The screen froze. Not black. Not broken. Just stuck. She lowered the phone. It worked perfectly. She tried again. Freeze. Third attempt. Freeze. But only when the camera was pointed at the doll. A monk quietly approached. Not angry. Not even surprised. He simply said, "Some eyes belong only to memory." She left the temple in silence. A university student came months later. She stayed longer than most. She stood before the glass. Waiting. Watching. She said she didn't see the doll move. But she felt something. Not on her skin. Not in the room. But behind her eyes. As if someone was slowly leaning forward. From inside her own mind. Watching her. Studying her. Smiling. When she finally stepped back, her chest was tight. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was thin. She told the monks, "It knew I was there." And the monk replied, "She remembers those who look back." In the town where the doll originally came from, people do not speak its name loudly. It is not the kind of fear that causes shouting or panic. It is something quieter, heavier, something carried for generations. The older residents do not see the doll as a curse, or a monster, or a demon. They see it as something unfinished. Something that was once alive, and simply never learned how to stop. There is an old woman who sits outside her home every morning, drinking tea as the sun rises. She knew Okiku's family when she was young. When someone once asked her about the doll, she did not hesitate. She said, "People who call it frightening have never known what loneliness truly is." Her voice did not shake. There was no superstition in her words. Only memory. She remembered the mother. How she continued to set an extra place at the table for months after her daughter died. How she would pause when passing the empty room. How the silence in that house felt like a second death. When the family finally moved away, nothing remained. The house was sold, the belongings scattered, the years passed. But the doll stayed. The villagers do not avoid the doll because they think it will harm them. They avoid it because they understand grief that has nowhere left to go. To them, the doll is still Okiku. A child who never got to grow older. Never got to learn what it means to leave. Never got to understand that the world continued without her. And so the villagers do not mock the doll. Or tell ghost stories to frighten children. They simply go quiet when her name is spoken. They lower their gaze, the way one does when passing a gravestone of someone they once knew. The children of the village grow up knowing the doll's presence, not because it is explained to them, but because they learn from the silence of the adults. There are no warnings, no threats, no legends. Just an understanding that some memories stay. The temple where the doll is kept does not hide it. There is no lock, no attempt to seal it away. Because sealing something is an act done out of fear. And fear is not what the villagers feel. Instead, the monks care for the doll. They speak to it gently. They trim its hair with steady hands, as though comforting a child before a long sleep. To the villagers, the doll is not dangerous. It is simply waiting. Waiting to be remembered. Some say the doll is still listening. Some say it still hears its name. And some believe that, in its silent glass case, it is still looking for the girl who once held it so tightly. The villagers do not want to disturb that waiting. Because they know that some memories do not fade. They simply learn to sit in the quiet. And stay. The doll remains where it has always been. Sitting behind glass. Quiet. Still. Watching. Visitors come and go. Some stay only for a moment. Some leave faster than they plan to. And some stand there for a long time, searching the doll's eyes for something they cannot name. There is no sign that explains its story. No plaque. No warning. No request for silence. The silence happens on its own. People who stand in front of the doll say there is a feeling, a gentle one at first. A sense of being seen. Not judged. Not threatened. Just recognized. As if something inside the glass knows how it feels to be left behind. They say the doll's expression is not frightening up close. It is small. Soft. Almost gentle. The horror does not come from what it is. It comes from what it remembers. It remembers being held. It remembers being loved. It remembers a child's warmth. A child's voice. A child's life that never had a chance to continue into adulthood. So the doll waits. Maybe for a voice that sounds familiar. Maybe for footsteps that match old memories. Maybe for the girl who once held it. To come home. And if you stand there long enough for the world outside the temple to fade, you may feel something too. Not fear. Not danger. But a quiet, heavy sadness. The sadness of something that has waited far longer than any human heart could bear. And when you finally walk away, you may find yourself thinking, was the doll looking at me? Or was it looking through me? Either way, the doll remains. Unmoving. Unfading. Still waiting. Some say objects cannot hold a spirit. Some say memories do not last this long. But in a small temple in northern Japan, there is a doll that has been smiling for more than 100 years. And the smile is not going away. It sits not in a hidden room, nor in a locked vault, but in a simple hall where sunlight enters softly through paper windows. The space is quiet, with polished wooden floors and a faint scent of incense that never fully leaves the air. The atmosphere is warm, but there is a stillness there, a stillness that feels older than the building itself. The doll is placed behind a glass case. Not bulletproof glass. Not reinforced museum glass. Just a clear pane, thin enough that if one wished, they could tap it with a finger. But no one does. Every morning, before visitors arrive, the monks of the temple begin their day not with chants, not with sweeping the entrance, not even with preparing the altar at the center of the hall. They begin by cleaning the glass of the doll's display. They do not clean it to keep fingerprints away. They do not clean it for appearance. They clean it for the doll. They say the doll should be able to see clearly. That whatever it watches, it deserves to watch without obstruction. Not because it is a relic. Not because it is sacred. But because it is present. One monk, elderly and thin, once explained it like this. We care for her because she remained. The doll's presence is not treated as an anomaly. Not a miracle. Not a curse. Just something that continued. Visitors often come expecting fear. They anticipate a shock, a sudden jolt, a cold dread that will rush up their spine the moment they see the doll. But that is not what they feel. Instead, the first sensation is recognition. A familiarity. As though the doll is not a stranger, but something remembered. The doll itself is small. Its kimono is faded, but kept clean. Its hair, black, straight, and unmistakably human, falls softly around its face and shoulders, painstakingly trimmed to an even length. And yet, no matter how carefully it is cut, no matter how precise the trimming, it grows back. This is not rumor. Not folklore. Not superstition whispered by grandmothers on late winter nights. This is observed reality. Each year, the monks hold a private ceremony. It is not open to outsiders. No photos are taken. No recordings are allowed. No one announces the date. The monks gather at dawn. The main hall is dim, lit only by a small cluster of candles. The doll is placed on a small wooden stand, facing forward, just as it always does, its expression unchanged. The monk responsible for the ritual picks up a pair of scissors. These scissors are older than any monk currently living. They have trimmed the doll's hair for decades, perhaps longer. The first cut is always the same. Slow, deliberate, careful. No one speaks during the trimming. There is no prayer spoken aloud. But there is reverence in the air. The hair falls in short strands, soft as silk. It gathers on the table in quiet piles. The movements are gentle, like a parent trimming a child's hair before school. When the hair is gathered, it is placed into a small cloth pouch. These pouches are stored in a wooden chest within the archives. No one looks inside after that. The hair is not displayed. It is not examined. It is simply kept. Not preserved. Not documented. Just kept. As though the monks believe the hair does not belong to them. Scientists have studied the doll, of course. Hair samples have been tested multiple times, in multiple laboratories. The findings always return to the same conclusion. The hair belongs to a human child. Not synthetic. Not animal. Not artificial. Human. What makes this more unsettling is that, under magnification, the hair does not show the dryness that occurs after death. Human hair, once it has left the body, becomes brittle over time. It frays. It loses its moisture. It begins to decay. But the doll's hair shows the opposite. It retains its structure. Its natural sheen. Its healthy fiber alignment. As though it were alive. Some scientists propose that the hair might have originally belonged to Okiku herself. That the family cut the child's hair and attached it to the doll after her death. There are records of such customs in Japanese mourning practices. Hair is sometimes preserved as a keepsake, a physical memory that the living can still touch. But this explanation collapses under the simplest of observations. Even if the hair belonged to Okiku originally, it should not be growing now. Cells do not regenerate after death. Hair does not produce new length without a living follicle. Yet the doll's hair grows slowly, steadily, year after year. Even more, the pattern of growth changed. In early decades, the hair grew straight and uniform. In recent years, some strands grew uneven, with slight waviness. As though influenced by the climate of the temple, the humidity of the coastal air, the quiet passage of time. The doll is changing. Not dramatically. Not grotesquely. But undeniably. Monks who have been with the temple for decades say the doll's expression has softened. Not a new smile, just a hint of gentleness at the corners of the mouth. A softness in the eyes that was not always there. Visitors sometimes describe the doll as watching them. Not with intensity. Not with malice. But with familiarity. As though the doll is remembering. Not just the girl who once held it. but everyone who stops to look at it now. The monks do not call the doll possessed. They do not call it haunted. They do not call it supernatural. They simply say, "She is still here. Not alive. Not dead. Just here." A memory that refused to fade. A presence that refused to leave. A love that did not understand how to end. And perhaps that is why the doll's smile has lasted so long. Smiles do not belong only to the living. They belong to the remembered.
There are places that were never meant to be forgotten. Places where mothers cried. Where children said goodbye. Where history should have lived forever. But some graves don't stay where they are. Sometimes, a cemetery is not destroyed in a day. It's erased slowly. Piece by piece. Until the world forgets the people who were buried there. Until their names become silence. This is the story of a cemetery that was paved over, built on top of, and erased, not by nature, but by human choice. Their lives before the burial ground were shaped by rules they did not choose. Many of the people who were laid to rest there had arrived in that land not by journey, but by force. Ships had crossed the ocean, bringing bodies that were treated as cargo rather than human beings. Work had been demanded, not offered. Voices had been silenced, not listened to. Yet even in a world that denied them autonomy, community still formed. People helped one another in ways history rarely documents. Mothers shared songs meant to protect their children from despair. Men taught each other skills quietly after dark so they could feel like more than labor. Faith took root in secret hideaways, whispered prayers traveling through walls and soil. Even when the world tried to erase identity, people rebuilt it in the shadows. When death came, families did what they could to honor the passing. There were no elaborate funerals. There was no choir, no polished wood coffins, no carved angels above the entrance. Instead, there were hands in the earth. A grave was dug. A cloth was wrapped. Words were spoken, but softly, because grief was personal and private, and the world offered no comfort except the ground itself. Sometimes, only 2 or 3 people attended. Sometimes, children stood where adults could not. Sometimes, neighbors walked with their heads lowered, trembling not from weather but from what sorrow does to the body. Yet each burial was an act of resistance. A declaration that, even if the world refused to see a person while they lived, someone had seen them. Someone remembered their laugh. Someone remembered how they held a cup, how they braided their hair, how they sang while working. Someone remembered their real name. This burial ground was not simply a place to end life. It was a place where dignity was repaired. That is why its loss mattered. Because this was the only location where these people were treated with gentleness. Not as workers. Not as possessions. Not as shadows passing through someone else's world. But as human beings. The cemetery held identity. It held the truth of existence. Every grave was a testimony. We were here. We lived. We loved. We mattered. So when the cemetery was gradually absorbed into the expanding city, it was not just soil that was displaced. It was the memory of hundreds of lives that were never granted the chance to leave records or stories behind. The people whose bones rested beneath that earth did not have books written about them. Their letters are not kept in museums. Their possessions were not passed down in families because families were fractured by force, generation after generation. For them, the land itself was the archive. The ground was the last proof of presence. And once the ground was taken, the memory was taken too. It did not happen suddenly. No announcement marked the shift. The burial ground was simply excluded from maps, omitted from official records, and eventually removed from local conversation. A silence grew around it, a deliberate silence. Silence designed to make forgetting look natural. Time did the rest. Grass became pavement. Markers became dust. Stories became whispers. Whispers became nothing. And yet, even when a place is buried, it is not gone. The earth remembers what people try to hide. And sometimes, memory waits. Quietly. Patiently. For someone to uncover it again. The burial ground had not been placed at the center of the town. It was positioned just beyond the edge of daily life, close enough for mourners to reach, yet far enough that those who held power did not have to confront the reality of the people buried there. That distance was intentional. Location can be a form of language, and the town had made its statement clearly. You may rest among us, but not with us. Paths to the cemetery were narrow and unpaved. Rain turned them to mud. Footprints filled with water and disappeared. Even while it still stood, it was a place that blended into the landscape, as though the town hoped the earth itself would swallow it. Visitors learned to walk quietly there. They stepped carefully around the graves, speaking softly because they understood what was at stake. Not reputation. Not wealth. Something deeper. Something the world rarely gives easily. Recognition. As the years passed, the burial ground became part of the background of daily life for those who lived nearby. Some residents knew what it was and avoided it out of discomfort. Others passed it without thinking, never asking who was buried beneath. A few remembered a name or two, but memories without context are fragile things. They fade unless they are kept alive deliberately. And no one with authority felt compelled to protect this place. The city's priorities shifted. New roads were planned. Schools needed expansion. Business districts grew. The burial ground stood in the way of the future the town imagined for itself, a future where efficiency mattered more than memory. The first argument used was always practicality. There isn't enough space. There are more important needs. No one visits it anymore. But practicality is often just a mask for something else. A more uncomfortable truth. Some histories are treated as optional. When the ground was first surveyed for repurposing, no ceremony acknowledged what was being done. Officials walked across the land with measuring rods and notebooks, marking boundaries and calculating costs. To them, the burial ground was simply terrain. Soil to be reshaped. Land to be acquired. A location on a map that could serve a different purpose. Not once did someone record the names of the dead before covering them. Not once did